Hello and welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. In November, I was invited to the Charleston Literary Festival, an annual boutique literary event in the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina. I arrived in the US on the 1st of November, less than a week before the election. South Carolina is a red state and the eventual Republican win there was always a given. However, the literary festival felt like an oasis of liberal thought in a state which has implemented one of the most restrictive book ban regulations in the entire United States. In this episode, I'd like to introduce you to three of the amazing women behind the Charleston Literary Festival. They are Diana Reich, Sarah Moriarty and Suzanne Pollak, and to one of the star writers, James Shapiro. I started by asking the founding artistic director, Diana Reich, to tell us more about her involvement.
Well, this is the actual 8th year of the festival here in South Carolina. Prior to that, I was the founder and artistic director of the Charleston Festival in East Sussex. The Charleston Festival in East Sussex takes place at the former Bloomsbury domain that had been inhabited by Vanessa Bell, the sister of Virginia Woolf, and her artist partner. She was an artist herself, of course, Duncan Grant, and it was the favourite meeting place of a number of creative artists, intellectuals associated with Bloomsbury, such as obviously her sister Virginia Woolf, Maynard Keynes, Lytton Strachey, Ian Forster. And the house was after the house was opened for the public, I was involved in that project. I felt very strongly that we didn't want it to become, just a shrine to which people came to worship. We wanted it to represent the dynamism and the creativity of the people who'd once lived there. And we just started in a very small way a series of live events, which developed into a festival. Anyway, after doing that for around 30 years, a group of people from Charleston in South Carolina visited the festival and asked whether we would help them establish something similar here in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've been involved with it since that time.
Here's the current artistic director, Sarah Moriarty.
I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and I moved to Charleston 3 years ago with my husband, my son and my dog. Pregnant at the time. We moved because of my husband's job, and as I was moving to Charleston, I was formerly living in Berlin, where I was working in a non-fiction book app, so sort of the intersection between new media and publishing. And I was leaving that job to move to Charleston, and as I was moving to Charleston, I got an email from a very interesting person named Diana Reich, who co-founded, or is one of the founding artistic director of the Charleston Literary Festival here in Charleston, South Carolina. And Diana Reich sent me an email saying, "Hi, I've heard that you were moving to Charleston, South Carolina, and I see that you have a background in literature, and I'd love for you to discover Charleston Literary Festival."
The festival here has gone from strength to strength. It's independent. Obviously, we're proud of our roots, but it's an independent festival. And my hope and goal was always that it would eventually have the same or similar reputation to the famous Spoleto Festival here, which is an internationally recognised music festival, which also interestingly had its origins in Europe, in Spoleto. And that's a much more well-established festival. It's over 40 years old now. And in fact, Sarah's husband is the director of that festival. We're all interlinked. And obviously we haven't reached the recognition that Spoleto has yet, but I hope we're on the way.
You certainly are. I mean, I was aware of this festival in London and also, of course, from chairing at Charleston in Britain. But coming here to this amazing city, it's absolutely buzzing with the energy of the festival. I don't know what it's like when the festival's not on, but certainly it feels just like I'm in some kind of wonderful creative hotbed. Every corner I turn, there is another author I know, a wonderful conversation going on. So for you, Sarah, coming here just 3 years ago and taking this over, I mean, firstly, there's the culture shock, right?
Yeah, huge culture shock in lots of different ways. And then also strange cultural affinities that I didn't expect. So one of the things, so obviously I mentioned I'm from Dublin in Ireland, and oftentimes I'm very surprised at how much Charleston reminds me of Dublin, because it's a very small city. It's cobblestoned pavements in the centre. It's sort of little streets and little places, and there's a character on every corner in Charleston. You know, the people are incredibly friendly, they're welcoming, they're open, and they all have a story to tell. And it does remind me, I mean, I was surprised at how much it sort of reminded me of home. I also lived in Berlin before this, and Berlin in Germany, and sometimes I like to joke and say, oh, they're two polar opposites, you know, Berlin in Germany and then Charleston, South Carolina, they're so opposite. But then they're also very similar, just in terms of cities with sort of big imaginations, but also dark, disturbing histories. And so the idea of memory culture and how do we deal with, you know, beautiful cities who are now rebuilding or re-exploring what they mean at their core, that's also a fascinating thing to navigate. And also at the Literary Festival to be part of that sort of retelling and recentering of stories right here in downtown Charleston.
So when you came and you took over, what was it that you were taking over at that point, and how has it changed and moved on from then?
Well, it's funny, I think the words take over are sort of very strong, and I feel like really we're definitely in transition right now. I came in first as sort of a marketing director, and I helped at the festival, and then the position for executive director opened up, and so I became executive director, which was fantastic. And then this year is the first year that Diana has stepped back officially as artistic director, and she's now senior artistic advisor. So what we're building here, so that the transition is sort of gradual, but what we're building here is a world-class literary festival with an international edge. That's the canvas that we have to build on. And then in terms of how that works, it's quite organic. And one of the strengths that we have is all of the expertise sort of on which the festival is built, the experience, all of this expertise. And now with this kind of very strong foundation, we can sort of evolve. What does it mean now for us to have this world-class literary festival with an international edge? One of the things that's exciting about this year is introducing elements of theatre into the programming. So we have the Baldwin versus Buckley debate that we're staging. A theatre company out of Brooklyn, American Vicarious, are coming to stage Baldwin versus Buckley, the famous Cambridge Union debate between James Baldwin and William F. Buckley to mark Baldwin's centenary. And the director will come out after the play and facilitate a conversation with the audience. So then the point is, yes, we sort of platform rhetoric and conversation, but then we also say to people, what resonates about this conversation for you today, which makes sort of this material even more relevant. And we also have a world premiere theatre production that we're producing this year at Charleston Literary Festival that will go live on November 8th, which is extremely exciting. Patrick Bringley, who former museum guard at the Met, wrote a book called All the Beauty in the World, which is about art and what art does for us, but it's also a book about grief. So his life was on one track. He was working in the New Yorker, he was sort of on a track, and then his brother died of cancer, and he decided he wanted to press pause on his life and find a loophole, and his loophole was to become museum guard at the Met. So the book deals with sort of how art helps us, what art does for us through civilizations, how art helps us deal with big, inexplicable feelings like grief after the death of a loved one, or similar. So Patrick came to the festival last year, came to Charleston, experienced just what you were describing, this sort of heady Charleston, everyone sort of pouring around and the excitement of the festival. At the beginning of the year, he reached out to us and said, Sarah, I've been travelling with my book for a while and it's starting to crystallise in my mind as a one-man play. And I was wondering if I could debut it at Charleston Literary Festival. And I was wondering if you think Dominic Dromgoole, who he had met at the festival last year, would be interested in directing it. And so we said, well, let's ask him. And it worked out. So now we're debuting this world premiere piece of theatre, which feels incredibly exciting. All that to say, world-class literary festival with an international edge, inherited from, this foundation that we inherited from Diana Reich.
We're not the only ones who call it world-class. Obviously we have ambitions for it, but I did want to say, we could give you loads of quotes, but last year Richard Ford was here. He must have been to every festival, nationally and internationally, and he said this is the best literary festival in America. Just on the platform now, the speakers said something along the lines that, this festival, should be the standard at which every other literary festival should follow. I just want to pick up just what Sarah said about the Patrick Bringley drama. So that's a youngish American author who came here last year with his debut book. He met here the renowned English director Dominic Dromgoole, who for many years was the director of the Globe Theatre in London, and out of that has spawned a new, totally new, innovative, creative project, which is going to be presented at the festival this year. Obviously, we're thrilled about that. We're thrilled for Patrick, we're thrilled for Dominic, we're thrilled for ourselves. But what I would just like to say about that, it says something about festivals, that festivals are less common in America, although we're by no means than in the UK, although we're by no means the only festival, but it's more common for authors to do book tours than to participate in festivals. Obviously, this is a continent, not just a country, and places are very far spread, and it's expensive to get around. But the serendipity that happens in a festival, where something is triggered in the chemistry between people, and something else is born through that, and another creation, something else artistic, or it could be a relationship, or it can only happen in a festival. So this is our first example of something so special being generated by the festival.
And how does this ally with your artistic vision, your creative vision that you initially came up with?
I think Sarah and I are very kindred spirits. We share the same artistic vision. So the artistic vision, it comprises several things. First of all, it is excellence, is literary excellence, and that can be excellence in different genres, but excellent of its kind. We've got to believe in it, and we've got to believe it's excellent in its kind. So quality really matters to us a great deal. And I always wanted it to be a national festival with an international edge, just in the way that Charleston in the UK, it wasn't primarily full of local authors, it was full of authors from all over the country, and very many visiting international authors, and we wanted the same for here. Obviously, local authors participate from the point of view of being interlocutors, and occasionally there may be a local author who has a book that has made waves nationally, and of course we'd be thrilled to include that person in the programme. But primarily it's bringing national authors to Charleston to interact with our community. And then we have a very strong commitment to the community, which actually Sarah has developed that, and I'd like, Sarah, you talk about our youth projects.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we bring all these wonderful writers to Charleston, and then the question is, how can we plug them into sort of what's happening here in the southeast? And so we've two sort of burgeoning programs that we're developing. We've the second year of our Young Writers Awards, where we award public high school students in 3 categories. So we run awards in 3 categories: fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. And this year, we had over 100 submissions, and we had 9 winners total, 3 first place winners. And it's just great because we get to sort of, yesterday on stage we had Paul Murray, the Irish writer, speaking about the bee sting, and before Paul Murray we had one of our winners on stage reading a small excerpt from her writing. So we had a 14-year-old from Charleston School of the Arts opening on stage for Paul Murray. And these little moments of connection are really exciting, and they're things that you remember, and they're formative, and they tell young people that their voices are important. And also authors, we find when they come, they love to meet young people. They love to plug into what's actually happening in a city so they can feel connected. And the other thing that we're doing this year for the first time is we're launching our inaugural Charleston Literary Festival Cato Fellowship, which awards a cash prize, a 10-day residency here in Charleston at Dock Street Theatre, and sort of access to all of the sessions and all of the authors, to emerging writers in North and South Carolina. So this year we have Litrea Graham, who's a non-fiction essayist, and we have Deja Moore, who's a poet, and they're joining us for the 10-day duration of the festival. So they have a little writing desk here in Dock Street Theatre. They can meet all of the authors, they attend all of the events, they have a dedicated session where they will present their work and, take questions and answers. But so we had something earlier on, and we saw Michelle Norris, who was on the stage today. Michelle Norris connecting with Latria Graham, for example. And so there's the fellows speaking with Michelle Norris here, and they're swapping phone numbers, they have everything in common. But again, it's sort of, we're bringing these writers here, so let's connect them to the very vibrant literary world that's actually here at our fingertips.
Just to add, I think the fact that this festival takes place in the South is very meaningful, because the South has been, when authors have been doing book tours, the South has been very neglected, and we really wanted to put it on the map. So though we wanted to make it a national festival, but we did want to make a contribution to the South. So we thought that those two awards, one for emerging writers that just started this year, and the one for young people still in their last couple of years of school, that's something that we did want to focus more locally on Charleston and South Carolina, so that we feel that we're giving something to the community and helping to nurture the next generation of readers and writers.
Nurturing the next generation of readers and writers doesn't come for free, though. Enter Suzanne Pollak, the development director responsible for raising funds. Suzanne, tell me about your involvement with the festival.
I started at the very beginning as interim director, but I didn't know I didn't know anything. And it was 4 days, and we didn't know if it would work. And I had just met Diana, and she invited these amazing authors the first year, 8 years ago, for 4 days, and it was like a sensation. But I just gotten divorced. I hadn't really worked except for writing cookbooks. And so the next year I thought, I'm going to get fired. The only way I'm not going to get fired is if I had to ask people for money. And I used to give money away, so I thought, I can do this. And so I asked somebody for $100,000, and they didn't blink an eye. And then I thought, okay, this festival is going to make the city such a better place. And so I actually love asking people for money, because I feel like if people are philanthropists, and there's a lot of them here, they just love opening their heart, and they realize this festival makes the whole city better. Mm-hmm. It makes people who come from New York, moved here, they think, okay, I can live here because it's so cultural, but also we do so much with the schools and with students, and so it makes an impact on everybody, all the citizens and the students, and it's such an important thing. I feel like it's the best thing I've done in my life. Oh, maybe having 4 children and 10 grandchildren, but...
What's the reading culture here in South Carolina?
The reading culture? Well, in Charleston, it's, as like any sophisticated city. But it is interesting that there are people really smart people, lots of my friends, and they'll say, I'm not really a reader, so I don't think this festival's for me. Or I'm not an intellectual, this festival's not for me. But I realize it's for everybody if you're curious. And we learned today from the memory guy, curiosity keeps your brain. But you don't have to read the books before you come. So I never did until a couple of years ago. But then you realize, oh my God, this subject, that subject, this subject, I never knew anything about. And then you read the books if you want to later. But the whole thing is, I think it gives you the biggest brain buzz. Mm-hmm. I have never taken drugs, but I feel like this is like a drug, because you go from, like you just did fiction, I loved Claire Massoud's book, and then you go to memory, you go to science, to history, to all kinds of things, and it kind of, your brain all day long is going, plus the connections you make with people, which is really one of the best things of the festival.
Absolutely. How have you seen it grow over the years that you've been involved, since the very beginning?
It was 4 days the first time, and now it's over 10 days, 37 events. And now we have 2 plays this year, which we never did anything like that. And this year we have 2 fellows, the Cato Fellows, giving a scholarship to emerging writers. And in high school, it's just grown like crazy. And the interest in it is amazing too. So after the festival, I shouldn't say this, but I could take 2 months off and relax. But now it's like, this is 24/7. It's so much work. It's the same little team doing it's just like 4 of us. And then we have these fantastic interns, and we have a great board. But it's a tremendous amount of work.
Now, last night we went to the recreation of Truman Capote's black and white ball. Tell me why you decided to do this.
I think that was Sarah's idea. We batted around a bunch of ideas at the beginning, and because Truman Capote's Lawrence Leamer's book came out, and so all these people were buzzing about it. I watched it, and plus I'm obsessed with all those swans, and we just thought
because you look like a swan.
I'm tall and thin, but we thought it would just be. And Charleston is a party town. It is just a party town, and my business really is teaching people how to cook and how to have a party and social IQ. I have a whole school of that, and so I thought this is going to be perfect. And so we had 315 people. We took over Festival Hall, which is the black box next to it, a red room, and we didn't really know how it was going to look. And Jameson Clare is an architect in town, and he had the vision to have those balloons come down, and the cantilever, and we had 29 tables. And so the last 48 or 72 hours, I arranged 29 tables. Who was going to sit where? Because I want so-and-so. I want you to meet this person, to meet that person. And so today, all day, I've been hearing, I met my new best friend last night. And in fact, last year at a party, I introduced 2 people, and now they're getting married. And it was from the festival.
That's extraordinary. Well, I have to tell you, I've had emails from the people on either side of me already going, we're going to do this together, we're going to do that together. I mean, yeah, it was fantastic. Perfect placement. I mean, it really was. And of course, the very first black and white ball was given in honour of Catherine Graham.
So yeah, we had to have a guest of honour, and who was that going to be? Well, it had to be Diana, because really she is the DNA of this festival. If it hadn't been from her right at the very beginning, we had these extraordinary, the first year, Ben Okri came from Nigeria. We had a Booker Prize poet. We just had these amazing authors. She just knows everybody. And she would never tell anybody who's coming till September. And so I'd imagine asking people for money, just, trust me, they're going to be good. Just give us some money. But it's been her little dream. And the way she curates everything is amazing. And actually, last year she's been helping Sarah, and this year. And so it's a really beautiful transition to watch.
And you also, of course, had Catherine Graham's son here, Stephen.
He had to give a toast. That's right. So Lawrence Leamer. So it was Diana's idea, I think, to do these literary interludes through the night. So we had Lawrence Leamer and the MC, Landon Bryant, who's a Southern sensation, interviewing him, and then Stephen Graham giving a toast, and then Sarah announcing the Diana Reich International Fund for authors. So it worked out perfect.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you had fun. Did you dance?
I did. It was just great. Where does the festival go next?
Oh, I don't know. We had to recuperate from this one. I mean, we already have plans. We're going to start the party planning in January. We have big plans for next year. So you need to come back. It is an international festival, so it's really fun to get people from all over and meeting each other in this beautiful city. The city adds so much to this festival. Don't you love it?
I certainly do. Finally, I spoke to one of the festival participants, the world-famous Shakespeare scholar, James Shapiro. Shapiro was named the winner of winners of the Baillie Gifford Prize, given to celebrate its 25th year. He's judged the Booker Prize, he's a professor at Columbia University, and he's also on the board of the Authors Guild. His new book is particularly apposite for culture lovers in these times. I asked him to give us the background to his latest work, The Playbook, a story of theatre, democracy and the making of a culture war.
In the depths of a depression, the United States government thought that the arts, as much as agriculture or industry, deserved financial support. And as part of that support, created a federal theater that put on 1,000 productions in 29 states, reaching 1 out of every 4 Americans who saw plays for free or next to nothing, and was transforming American culture before Congress shut it down.
Why did they shut it down?
It was low-hanging fruit, and there were those opposed to the New Deal who couldn't attack as popular a president as Roosevelt, but decided to attack his programs. Even today's Social Security, one of those New Deal programs, is still under attack. The first and only New Deal initiative in 1939 that was attacked and destroyed was the Federal Theater. It was accused of being un-American by those who served on the first House Un-American Activities Committee. So this is really a story of two playbooks, the playbooks that informed those 1,000 productions, and the playbook we're so familiar with now in our divisive time that's used to attack and destroy efforts to bring Americans together through culture, especially theater and books.
So we're speaking, just a few days ahead of really probably one of the most consequential elections in our lifetime. And as you say, exactly the same thing is happening again. We're speaking in South Carolina, and in this particular state, they have been talking about banning books like Romeo and Juliet, like 1984, classics that every child reads.
I saw Romeo and Juliet on Broadway 2 nights ago in a theater packed with millennials and Gen Zs. And it was really exciting and reassuring to see that I was the oldest person rather than the youngest person in the theater at that time. I think it's clearly misplaced. Anybody who's 15 will tell you that their schoolmates are watching porn or sexting on a regular basis, so that the so-called obscene bits in Romeo and Juliet kind of pale in comparison to what young people are now exposed to. South Carolina doesn't even have strong laws against this. So I think it's part of the same larger playbook that I describe in my book. You talk about our particular moment and how last week there was a rally in my hometown, New York City, at Madison Square Garden, and analogies were made to the rally on February 20th, 1939. At that rally, the man who was responsible, Martin Dies, for destroying the Federal Theater Project, was celebrated along with Hitler and Mussolini. So what goes around comes around.
Now, I understand in the meeting here in South Carolina, Romeo and Juliet wasn't actually banned in the end. It was on a list of possibles. Sally Rooney was. Sally Rooney, the Irish writer, contemporary Irish writer. What does this mean for where we are now?
I served as a Booker Prize judge a year ago. I read 161 novels over a 7 or 8 month period. Sally Rooney didn't have a novel that year. Since then, she's written a great one, Intermezzo. I think her novel, Normal People, is being debated in South Carolina right now. Young people are going to find their way to Sally Rooney. History does not treat those who ban books well. I was in Germany at the American Academy in Berlin last spring, and traveled in Berlin and Heidelberg, and there are memorials in those places to where the Nazis burned and banned books. I don't know where those memorials will be in South Carolina, but there will be such memorials if book banning takes hold here.
So what is the purpose, and I'm talking to you now with your Society of Authors hat on, what is the purpose of banning these books? What do they hope this will achieve? And what is your organization doing to try and stop it?
The Authors Guild is involved in all kinds of educational and litigational practices. We're challenging, for example, how AI has stolen material and continues to steal material from writers, including many at this festival, including myself. And we are fighting against efforts across the land, not just in South Carolina, but in almost every state, to ban books, to ban access to reading material. You have to understand that the average American reads a novel a year. That is, somebody who's an adult. That's one novel a year. And, or rather, I think statistically in the NEA, I don't have it off the top of my head, but the National Endowment for the Arts statistics rather say half of Americans read a novel a year. We're not a reading culture. And one of the reasons why disinformation and the inability to sift through a lot of stories that are being peddled in our political climate, that inability stemmed from the fact that we're not the kind of readers that previous generations were. I think of President Abraham Lincoln in the White House, who had much of Shakespeare by heart, and as he struggled with the challenges of healing a nation, he turned again and again to Shakespeare. I think he'd be turning in his grave if he knew anybody was considering banning a Shakespeare play and denying access to it to young people.
I mean, finally, we are facing a possible Trump future. What will that mean for culture?
It won't be good. I think that worst case scenario, people will be locked up. People will be sent out of the country. Best case scenario, a steady degradation of culture, simply because when you have a president and congressional figures who see culture as something belonging to the left rather than belonging to us all, we're in danger. One of the arguments of my book is that theater and democracy were twin-born in ancient Greece. You don't have a strong democracy unless you have a strong theater. You don't have a strong theater unless you have a strong democracy. And I'm afraid that under Donald Trump, we will not be experiencing a strong and vibrant democracy.
James Shapiro there. Well, as we know, Trump did win the election. We've yet to see what this will mean for culture. But whatever happens, I believe the Charleston Literary Festival in South Carolina will remain a shining beacon of free speech and independent thought. If you'd like to know more about the festival and perhaps plan your own visit there in November 2025, then do head to the website charlestonliteraryfestival.com. And that's all for this edition of Meet the Writers, which was produced and edited by Steph Chungu. You can listen to previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.